Audio rolling, camera is rolling. All right, Tim, action.
Hello, my name's Tim Malone and I'm a retired history teacher. And I've been taping lectures for YouTube, my YouTube channel, Tim Malone History Lectures. Check it out. Today I'm going to talk about the New Deal. Now, this is the third lecture I'm taping about the Great Depression and the New Deal. The reason I've spent so much time on it is because of the importance I put on it. In most textbooks, and I'm familiar with lots of them, the New Deal is treated with the Great Depression. The chapter title is inevitably The Great Depression and the New Deal. Now, Alan Brinkley, the largest selling textbook writer in America, he breaks with that tradition in that he, in his textbook, has the Great Depression in one chapter and the New Deal in the next. And I like that. I think that's the proper way to approach this subject. The Great Depression and then the New Deal separately. So today we're going to talk about the New Deal. The New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt's prescription for getting the United States out of the Great Depression. His policy proposals and his policies that were passed in response to the Great Depression. It's called the New Deal. Now I think that Teddy Roosevelt, Franklin's cousin, back in 1900 or 1904, was the first candidate to name his campaign. The Square Deal, Teddy called it. It was a PR stunt, and every presidential candidate since then has named their campaign. Lyndon Johnson, the Great Society. Franklin Roosevelt named his the New Deal, aping off of his cousin's 30 years before, the Square Deal. Woodrow Wilson had the Fair Deal. Deals figure largely in names of campaigns. The New Deal. And that's the New Deal, Franklin Roosevelt's New Deal, is the most famous campaign ever named, and it resonates down through history, the New Deal. The New Deal is a big deal in U.S. history. Today, 2025, you and I live in a New Deal world still. It's almost 90 years. We're getting on 90 years that the New Deal was inaugurated. And we live fundamentally, we live in a New Deal world to this day. It's one of the most important things in U.S. history, in my opinion. The New Deal. You should know about the New Deal and what it did to our country, because we're still there. Now, Franklin Roosevelt, as I think I mentioned in a previous lecture, is the quintessential liberal in American history. A New Deal liberal, Franklin Roosevelt liberal. And so conservatives have been hating on and denouncing and talking down the New Deal for all 90 years of its history. And when a conservative is elected president like Reagan in 1980, and George W. Bush in 2000, and Trump in 2016 and 2024, they always talk like, elect me and I will do away with, I will chip away at, I will dispense with the New Deal. Now, a lot of them aren't that blunt about what they're doing, but that's what they're doing. The conservatives in this country are still not reconciled to the changes, the fundamental, epic changes that were brought about to the U.S. economy and U.S. society by the New Deal that has resonated. 90 years. We're still in a New Deal world. 90 years. It's important for Americans to understand the importance of the New Deal. Historians believe the present is constructed. It's constructed like a house, like a bridge. And events, policies, elections, wars are the planks and the girders that construct the present. And when you look at America's history, the New Deal is one of the most important, robust, enduring planks that have constructed the world you live in. As much as World War II, as much as Vietnam, perhaps more. Certainly economically. The New Deal, I want to stress that. You should know about the New Deal. The New Deal, what did it do? It altered the relationship between the American people and the federal government. The federal government, which was constructed by the Constitution of the United States, way back 1787. The New Deal fundamentally altered the relationship between the American people and the federal government. The president, mostly, becomes responsible for economic performance. Now, we're so used to that idea that the president is responsible for prosperity or the lack thereof that we don't even think past that. But before the New Deal, before the Great Depression, presidents were not held responsible for economic performance. You could have in the late 1800s, you could have a nasty recession, a panic on Wall Street, thousands unemployed, and the populace, the electorate, did not blame the president. Roosevelt, the New Deal, changed that. And rightfully so, in my opinion. The president should be responsible for overall economic performance. And thus, we live in that world to this day. The president is held responsible for providing an adequate number of good jobs to the American people. Jobs, employment, become a fundamental statistic in American life. And the president and the Congress, the federal government, is held responsible for a lack of good jobs, adequate number of good jobs. With the New Deal, a new balance was struck between capitalism and democracy. The democratic elements of our government became responsible for the performance of capitalism. Now again, your laissez-faire, hardcore conservative doesn't like that idea. Capitalism should not be tampered with for any reason, even when you're mired in the depths of a Great Depression and 25%, 29%, 30%, the numbers vary, of the workforce is out of work. No, it's not. Leave it alone, laissez-faire, let it be, ride it out. That was the dominant idea before Roosevelt, before the New Deal. And to this day, it's the economy, stupid. People say that in 2024, last year, Trump was reelected because people thought he would be better for the economy. It's the economy, stupid. That famous line from 1992 campaign. Economic performance is expected from our political leaders. And again, it's hard for us to believe today that that wasn't the case. And I don't mean to exaggerate. Of course, to a certain degree, pre-New Deal, politicians were held responsible for the economy, but not like it is today. The New Deal brought us what I guess you could call the regulatory state. That is, government agencies, departments, and commissions watch this thing we call the economy and take actions to stabilize it. The regulatory state. Capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism. Capitalism, if unwatched by somebody in a democracy, by the democratic government, makes sense to me. If capitalism isn't regulated, it'll go off the rails sooner or later. Inevitably, capitalism will self-destruct. Capitalism will implode if not watched. That's what the New Deal brought. That's what the New Deal revolution was about. Agencies, federal government, agencies watch, count, keep track of the economy and attempt, not always successfully obviously, but attempt to stabilize it. Because unregulated capitalism is not stable, it's unstable. Perhaps the prime example of the regulatory state is the Securities and Exchange Commission, the SEC, created to regulate Wall Street by the New Dealers. Because, again, left to its own devices, capitalism is unstable, will create recessions, depressions, mass unemployment. As regards the regulation of capitalism, the New Deal is a continuation and amplification of the progressive movement. New Deal didn't come out of nowhere. Franklin Roosevelt, FDR, was a progressive during the tail end of the progressive period. And so he was amenable to government regulation. Government regulation. And this battle between the regulators and the free marketeers is with us to this day. And I don't know why. To me, the proof is undeniable. Capitalism, which, I'm in favor of capitalism. I like new ideas. I like entrepreneurs, right? I don't mind somebody getting rich on a good new idea. But they have to be regulated by the federal government. Left to their own devices, the capitalists will implode the system sooner or later. The New Deal changed labor relations in the country. The National Labor Relations Act, also called the Wagner Act, in 1935. The federal government, under Franklin Roosevelt and the New Dealers, goes from being opposed to unionization to being supportive of unionization. Also, it is during the New Deal that the 40-hour work week was instituted, and the first minimum wage is established. The federal government setting a minimum wage. The federal government allowing workers, supporting workers in their efforts to unionize. Now, of course, the Wagner Act was sort of overturned right after World War II, the Taft-Hartley Act, and unions still have trouble to this day because, of course, the business community was not in favor of workers unionizing, and it's you get a Republican president and unions suffer. You get Democratic presidents, and they're improved. To this day, this workers' relationship with their employers being regulated by the federal government is an issue to this day. The New Deal, the advent and ascent of Keynesian economics. Now, I've talked about Keynesianism before, mentioned it. It's during the Great Depression that the English economist John Maynard Keynes writes his treatise about the proper relationship between the economy and the government. And of course, Keynes is in favor of government intervention to stabilize capitalism. And again, just an editorial comment. I don't know who should be opposed to that. It's obvious from history, and let me repeat, it's obvious from history that capitalism, laissez-faire capitalism, will bring about depressions if left to its own devices. And when you have a democratic government, especially a democratic government where the leaders are elected by the people, it only makes sense to me that the government should intelligently logically intervene to stabilize the system, to avoid the downturns. I don't understand where the argument comes from to go back to an era where you had boom and bust. Keynesianism. Now, I'm thinking I'm going to do a lecture on Keynesianism. I have a lot of information. I've read some books. But the main thing that Keynesianism did was supply and demand. The economy is based on supply and demand. And the original economics, what you study in econ class 100 years ago or 140 years ago, was all supply side stuff. The capitalists. And what do you expect in a capitalist system? That the entrepreneurs, the bankers, the people with the money dominated economic thinking. The Keynesian revolution was, Keynes was, no, you don't have to pamper those guys. Think about the consumers. Think about the masses. If they're got some money, you don't have to worry about these guys. They'll take care of themselves. The government should be on the side of demand. Demand. Supply will take care of itself if there's requisite demand. And so the New Deal brought in what I call demand maintenance programs by the government. For example, Social Security. Now again, I could do an entire lecture on Social Security. I've talked about it before, that it's nice, Social Security, universal, everybody's in, supported by its own tax, FICA tax, government-run program. When people get too old to work, and they haven't been lucky enough to work for a company that had a pension plan, or they weren't lucky enough to make enough money during their working life to save up to support themselves when they're too old to work, the government steps in. Universal old age pension, run by the government, everybody's in, funded by its own tax. You might say, oh, wow, that's great. Grandma and grandpa aren't going to starve. Grandma and grandpa, they worked their whole lives. They deserve to have some dignity in their old age. That's why we have Social Security. No, it's not. We have Social Security for a much more cold, hard-headed reason. It gives grandma and grandpa some money to what? Spend. It's a demand maintenance program. You give them money so they'll spend it, because that's where the economy starts. Demand side. Keynesianism is demand side economics. So not only do you have Social Security, you have unemployment compensation. You have welfare for poor people. Well, yeah, you just send the single mother with 4 kids down the street, you send her a check every month, paid for by the taxpayers. Oh, that's terrible, going to erode the morals of the country. Oh, but no, Jesus said, support the poor. That's why we do it. Charity. No, that's not why we send checks to poor people. We send checks to poor people so they'll spend it. Demand maintenance. Demand rules. To hell with the capitalists. If demand is requisite, they'll do okay. You don't have to pamper them. Oh, nice poor people. The battle between the original older classical economics, the supply side, and Keynesian economics continues to this day. Again, the trickle-down, the bogus trickle-down theory that if you pamper the rich, they'll build factories to employ the poor. Oh, yeah, that's the ticket. No. If the consumers have some money, the factories will get built. Demand-side economics. Another point. The New Deal ushered in 60 years of Democratic Party dominance of national politics. Franklin Roosevelt was elected 4 times. Truman won after him. We had Eisenhower, who was a bit of a moderate. He wasn't a supply-sider Republican. Then Kennedy, Johnson. 60 years of Democratic dominance of national politics. Lyndon Johnson's Great Society in the 1960s was a self-conscious attempt to complete, expand, and renew the New Deal, resulting in Medicare and Medicaid. There we have another couple New Deal programs enacted by Lyndon Johnson in the 60s, but when he was proposing Medicare and Medicaid, he was hearkening back, I remember the speeches, he was hearkening back to Franklin Roosevelt and the New Deal. Universal health care, Obamacare in the aughts. Again, I think Obama didn't hearken back to the New Deal enough when he was campaigning for his Obamacare. The idea of Medicare, the government-run universal old age medical insurance program run by the government, Medicare for everybody. Now, most of the developed world has it. They can afford it. The idea we can't afford to do universal health care, health insurance for everybody is just false, in my opinion. And that's the next step, but it's been the next step for a long time. The Democrats, in my opinion, ought to run hard on universal health care. Medicare for everybody. We already have Medicare, tens of millions of old folks. I'm on Medicare. Universal health insurance for everybody. Everybody. And again, let me just, for a little while here, say, what's national security? National security. We're building more nuclear submarines and more aircraft carriers. And if we took those billions of dollars and gave universal health care to Americans, which promotes national security the most? What gives you mass national security? A 13th or 14th aircraft carrier in the Persian Gulf or who knows where? Or health insurance for every American? What do you think promotes national security? I guess I'm crazy.
Hell no, you're not.
The New Deal advances social democracy in the United States. Peter Timmons' book, I mentioned him about the causes of the Great Depression. What do social democrats want? Social democracy. Number one, they want government ownership or regulation of the heights of the economy. Banks, insurance companies, investment companies, stock and bond markets, utilities should be either owned by the government, which happens, has happened. Milwaukee used to have electric utility. You sent your bill to City Hall for electricity. Well, just about every water system in the country is socialized. I drink socialized water. You probably do too. You send your bill to the government. Because why? Because water's too important to leave to capitalism? Because our banks are federally insured. That was a result of the New Deal. The heights of the economy. The government must have a hand in regulating stockbrokers, banks, insurance companies, housing credit markets. Second, what do social democrats want? Government intervention in the setting of wages. Yes, government intervention in the setting of wages. Free market, laissez-faire in the labor market doesn't work. The government has to set a minimum wage. On the bottom, minimum wage. At the top of the workforce, government, at least neutrality towards unionization. The government should support, well, just be neutral, just be fair about workers' efforts to unionize. At the top of the wage scale, government intervention there, and at the bottom, a minimum wage that keeps track with inflation. And then the third thing a social democrat wants is a safety net at the bottom, welfare. And again, just last week, I had talking heads on my TV saying, we're going to ruin the morale of the poor people. We got to make them have a job in order to get Medicaid. Medicaid, the Lyndon Johnson, Great Society, New Deal, medical insurance, government-run medical insurance for poor people, Medicaid. They want to impose a work requirement. You shouldn't sit at home and not work if you're able-bodied, or even if you're watching 4 kids. You should have to work. It's a moral. It's morals. What's morals? You send welfare to the poor so they'll spend it, so the rich can get richer. Stupid rich people. Welfare at the bottom. So government regulation of the heights of the economy, government intervention in wages, and welfare at the bottom for the poor people. The New Deal. The New Deal. 90 years. You live in a New Deal world. Know it. Know about it. It's a reality.